How's it going, Chris?
You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
What's up, boss?
I do. I ain't no boss. You're my boss. I got 39 bosses. I got more than 39. I got approaching 50 bosses.
I'm sure.
How you been?
Busy, man. Man, oh man. But it'll get better.
Hmm.
You don't have to crap on the Phillies. We're in a little bit of a skid right now.
Hey, I think I told you when I was a kid that the Phillies were my team. That was the Vet Stadium a couple times with my grandpa. So yeah.
Yeah.
What am I trying to do here? Jeremy, how you doing?
Hey, Greg. Can't complain. Still here, as you can see. Still surviving.
Yeah. Are you the only one in your office? Can you do whatever you want?
It's definitely a little bit quieter in here.
Yeah. I'm smiling. I'm kind of chuckling, but it's not really the way I look at it. It's kind of messed up. Well, it's more than kind of.
I'll say, overall things are starting to flatline a little bit, I think, as far as just, I don't know about getting back to normal, but normalizing. I finally got travel approval for one upcoming meeting.
Okay.
So that's a step in the right direction, I suppose.
Yeah. So approaching a new normal, sort of.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So I've been working on other things, including getting the spring meeting contract signed and all that, but I will be moving on an agenda for the fall meeting. At least it is not going to be a lot of detail because we're still trying to figure out what day 2 is with the Aurora group. But anyway, I am going to put that out here pretty soon. I would assume, or do you not need necessarily to have that in hand in order to get your travel approved for the fall?
No, to be honest, they don't even care about that. I just need to
okay.
I just need to go and say, hey, this is going on, and be able to justify it in a sense that
okay.
The state DOTs care that our presence is there.
Yeah. All right.
Just real quick before we get started, I had a question for you, Greg, because I must have missed it, but I had an opportunity to talk with Doug McBroom, who is no longer the chair. Who is now the chair?
Todd Law is the new chair.
Todd Law. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And trying to think, I thought I put something out to the whole TAC a little while ago, but I must have left the partners off. I'll have to go back and look at that.
I might have missed it too.
And it was, it was probably initiated by Craig Bardfried. Or no, Doug McBroom. Doug McBroom was the one that put it out. That's what it was. Doug did, because he said he had to step away. So he had used whatever list that he used and didn't include the partners in that. So, and then, of course, mentioned that Todd Law would be stepping in. So.
Got it.
Anyway, yep. All right. Well, we've got a lot of folks here, and I think we've got pretty much everybody. I could check person for person, but I think we got more than enough to go ahead and get us started here. Yeah, according to my clock, it's right at 10 o'clock Central. So, so this, thank you everybody for joining. This is a project scoping meeting, so there's a couple of you that are sort of new to this process. You'll see at the top of I'm sharing the research idea form that Mark Goldstein, our chair from Massachusetts, put together and shared with us today some of his minor revisions that he put to that. But you'll see that this is a 2024 synthesis project. Without getting too in depth, too far into the weeds, when we signed a contract for CTC to continue to manage Clear Roads, all the synthesis projects, due to a contracting abnormality, I guess you could say, kind of got pushed out a little bit. So we're catching up right now. So hopefully, throughout this year and into early next year, we'll get caught up on all the 24, get started on the 2025 synthesis project, and get more back to normal in terms of the timing of these. But the point of this meeting is to scope out this project. So whenever we get this, I call this a research idea form. It's essentially a 1-pager, 2-pager kind of deal that very generally lays out what it is that Clear Roads is looking to get out of this project. With the scoping project, we want to take it a step further, put some more meat on the bone, and really, have a good sort of plan forward with what we're going to be looking into going into this project. And this is most synthesis projects, not all, but most synthesis projects are conducted by CTC. So this one will be conducted by CTC. My colleagues, Chris Klein and Susan Johnson, have joined us here today. So they're going to be, listening in, taking notes, asking questions, and even, if either one of you wants to step in and, and help guide this a little bit, feel free. I might turn to you for questions as well. So, but what we typically do with each of these projects is it's fairly an informal process. We'll just kind of let it flow organically, but we'll start off by going to Mark, the project chair, and have him sort of walk through again the need for this project, what he wants to see come out of this, and then I'll have the rest of you sort of chime in after he's done, and we'll just see where this takes us. So does anybody have any questions before we get going? All right, Mark, it's all yours. Mark, you're muted. I'm sorry, I know it's a pain in the butt when this happens. And it doesn't even look. Where the heck is my cursor? It doesn't even look like you are muted. My mic shows active. Yeah, I know. I'm kind of seeing the same thing from this end. Huh. So he's going to jump out and jump back in probably. Yeah. Oh, wait. No, he's still on with us. All right, so let's see here. So he's sharing what he wanted to, with writing, what he wanted to tell us using his own words. So since the synthesis was approved, a few modern concepts have entered the snow and ice marketplace. So image-based road condition assessments, adaptive spreading programs, material science advances such as ice-phobic coatings for materials used for infrastructure, newer wing plows, and expandable front plows. Good snow and ice mitigation still relies on well-timed plowing and de-icing material applications, but modern guidance is available to inform such as variables as when and how much de-icing material. Not everything is positive regarding the way snow and ice fighting industry is heading. Winter is struggling. By the way, while I'm reading this out, I don't know if, Mark, what you might try to do is call in with your phone. If you go to...
I think I'm solved.
Oh, there you are. I hear you.
I just went into settings and I was just, I didn't want to stop you again, but I tweaked a couple of things and...
You're good.
Okay,
It's
so
much better if
guys...
you just talk us through this.
All right, so you all have limited resources and they're becoming more and more limited in some ways. Finances, I think we're all going to struggle to get our hands upon as much money as we thought we had in the past. And maybe that's not true, but it feels true. It just feels a little dark in some of our buildings right now because we don't know, which way funding's going to go for many of our programs. So we need to make the most of every single dime. So Snow and Ice 2030, as we named it, we want to look at the available technologies and the newer ones, the emerging technologies that we want to try to understand. It's not all about, I guess it's not all about things on computers. This is what we do is where blades and de-icing materials hit the road. It's kind of an old business. We're still doing things in many ways. We still do the same things we did 80 years ago, 70 years ago, but we can do them smarter. So we got to be doing things smartly, and we've got to be using less material because most of us are under an environmental microscope. In Snow and Ice de-icing materials, it's probably 10 or 15% or more of your budget. So you can't just waste budget like that. So I don't think the goal of the synthesis has changed since we approved it a little over a year ago. I added a few concepts that are hitting the marketplace, just, the things I called out in red font. But I really haven't been part of a scoping process for a synthesis project, so I don't really know what else I can do to guide the process. And if anybody else has anything to add, I'd love some help.
Greg, this would be more of a question for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might be really good to have Chris just step in for a second and let us know kind of what the scope, I guess, is for a synthesis project as a sort of general rule, and that'll help you guys understand what kind of information you can provide us and what we can take from you to take the next steps.
Sure, Greg, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you today. As Greg said, this is a synthesis. It's not a research project, so it's limited scope. It's limited in scope in terms of calendar time and perhaps more significantly in terms of budget. So what Susan and I, my colleague Susan Johnson, who is also on the call today, who will be doing much of the work on this project, are listening for today is what is most important to you and what do you want to take away from this? When you read the draft report that we will deliver, what do you hope to find? What do you want to see in there? What should that deliverable look like? But we also need to be mindful of, as I said, this limited scope. We can't answer every question. We have to be mindful of what is probably an overused term, and I'm sure you've heard it when you oversee research projects, scope creep. We can't answer everything. So you've given us just that general idea of what are the emerging trends, what are the where do people in your position think this is going, what could we find in the literature about what is going to, I think, potentially shift direction for the work that you do. That's a pretty big topic. You've helped to target it, Mark, by giving us real specific topics that we can look at, and we can do that. We can look at the literature, we can look at the research, we'll do a survey. Let me back up a second. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a synthesis effort looks like for Clear Roads, it's multifaceted. We do, we do a literature search, which is pretty standard. You're familiar with those. You see those, in a very limited fashion before the research is conducted that you oversee. We will do a deep dive into the literature for this, and I think we will probably find some really interesting things. I don't know that you call them futurists, but people who are assessing where the future of winter maintenance is going to go. So that's one piece, the literature. Second piece is a survey. You have undoubtedly answered synthesis surveys that we've done for Clear Roads and likely for other organizations. And I think what unless you disagree, I would want to do a survey to get a sense from your counterparts within Clear Roads, what you think. Where do you think this is going, given what's going on within your agencies? Where do you hope it goes? That sort of thing. So we'll prepare a survey to gather information about maybe some of these critical areas that you're really interested in. If there's some consensus on, what do you most want to know about? We'll ask you and your colleagues about that as well. And the third component of the synthesis is reaching out to experts in the field. Now, sometimes those experts in the fields are just you folks. We'll identify agencies that maybe have some really interesting things in the works, or folks that are active in other research, and then we'll reach out and we'll learn more about it. Sometimes we develop case studies if we've learned something really interesting that isn't already published publicly. So keep in mind those three components that we can and most often do for all the synthesis work that we do for you folks. And then what we want to hear from you today is, as I said, ideally, what do you want that deliverable to do for you? When we document all of these findings, what do you hope to find? And then I think, because when you're looking at the future, big topic, lots of potential things that we could be looking at, give us a list of priorities. What are the areas? Are you most interested in materials? Are you most interested in, well, you mentioned the equipment hasn't necessarily, well, obviously there are advancements. There's all sorts of advancements in the winter maintenance equipment that you're using. Are you really interested in that? Are you interested in data? Are you interested in, technology? If you're interested in all of that, we can do a lighter touch on all of those things. But if there's one or two or three areas that you're really, really interested in, then we can do a deeper dive. So with that, Greg, do you have anything you want to add before we turn it back to the subcommittee, excuse me?
No, I think that was a really good framework for what a synthesis looks like. But yeah, I think just to sort of reiterate a couple things you said there, not only what is it that you want to see when you read through this report, but also be, obviously, like Chris said, that, we'll be reaching out to experts in the field, and oftentimes, so you are those folks, but who else do you want us to talk to? Is there a particular person or group of persons that you think might be either important to see, to include in the survey, or as follow-up interviews to sort of supplement the survey, which Chris referred to as well. So if you have somebody that you think would be in particular good position to provide some insight on the future of winter maintenance, and anybody that you I guess that's really all I had. Yes, I guess if you have particular folks that you think you want us to reach out to, that would. And then if there was any particular, you mentioned a number of technologies here. One of the things that's been coming up more recently in some of our discussions, or actually through the research development process for this year, January through March, it never actually. I don't think we didn't really put any projects together on this, but AI was mentioned a couple different times by different folks. And so especially when we're talking about, and you did refer to data analysis, data processing here, that could be an interesting component to that, and, capability for dealing with large amounts of data. So this might be an opportunity then to deal with some of that AI discussion that came up during the research development process, but that didn't actually make it to a research or synthesis idea funding. So
I got to say, I'm most interested.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm most interested in things that increase efficiency of our programs, cost savings, material savings. Those are big things for us. Anything that can save us money, time, materials. It kind of holds off the environmental problems. And can we circulate this to some of the researchers as well that help us with these things? You know, do they ever fill out these, like a Wilf Nixon? Does he fill out surveys? You know, some of these,
Yeah.
he's an expert. I mean, some of the voices that we want informing this survey, like even Jeremy. I mean, is that a conflict of interest, Jeremy?
No.
You already know that I like giving my opinion. No, I would include also PyArc and CERWEC. That's something we typically haven't done from the other synthesis studies I've seen, but I think that getting the international perspective would be pretty great in this case.
So, Jeremy, I'm familiar with PyArc. What was the second one?
So specifically with PyArc, they have the winter weather committee, which is actually really
Oh,
huge.
okay.
But also CERWEC, which is the Standing International Road Weather Commission, I think. And it started in Europe, but it's international now too, and they focus specifically on snow and ice stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of that, we do have, Clear Roads has partners through the Norwegian Public Road Administration that have visited us before and presented to us at previous Clear Roads meetings. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to travel for some time, but they're still pretty involved whenever we ask for, oh, there you go. Thank you, Jeremy. They're pretty involved when we ask for, you know, survey responses or any kinds of, you know, to pass information along to colleagues over there in Northern Europe. They're excellent in that regard. And they've got some really cool technologies that they've been using. So thank you for sharing those things, Jeremy.
Yep, of course. I also wanted to clarify too, and I think this was right before Chris had started talking about synthesis studies, but in general, the rule of thumb is that synthesis studies don't generate new information, correct? They're just going to synthesize or combine existing ideas and information. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for everyone too.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Jeremy, and it's essentially a snapshot in time too. I mean, it's a limited scope effort. We're gathering information. We're not drawing conclusions. We're not making recommendations. We are identifying as best as we can, given the limited scope of the synthesis effort, what is the state of the practice now that's so a little bit different in this regard for this topic, because it isn't so much the state of the current practice, it's what do people anticipate future practices to be. The same principle applies. Absolutely, we're just gathering up information, presenting it in a readable fashion to give you a sense of where things are at today. Thank you. And thank you for the recommendation, everyone, to expand our survey distribution. That would have been one of the more specific questions we would ask before the call concludes. So thank you. You've given us that information ahead of time. We're familiar with you know, the researchers that have done work for Clear Roads recently and historically. And what we can do, one thing that we haven't yet talked about, but maybe this is an opportunity for me to bring it up. What comes out of today's meeting is a project scope. I think, Greg, you may refer to those differently these days, but typically it's a project scope that reflects back to you what we understand the scope, or excuse me, the nature of this topic to be. What you've identified as the issue and what you're hoping to get out of this project. And then what we do is tell you, as briefly as we can, what we propose to do to complete the synthesis effort. So we'll identify the topics we're going to look for in the literature search, and we're going to present a draft survey for you to review. If there's specific questions that you have today that you want us to include in that draft survey, by all means, let us know. If you don't have specific questions today, that's perfectly fine. We'll take a shot at it and come up with a series of questions that the subcommittee will then be able to review, reflect on, revise, tell us what we've missed, keeping in mind that we want to keep it manageable. You know, that this is a limited effort, and so we are going to be mindful of that as we prepare the questions. We don't want to discourage participation also by having too lengthy a survey. The work that we do is different from the synthesis reports that you will see produced by NCHRP, because NCHRP surveys will not include open-ended questions, and if they do, they're very targeted. That isn't even a correct characterization. Suffice it to say, we will include open-ended questions. We're not afraid of open-ended questions, but we want to make sure that we can manage the volume of response that we get, because some of these ideas and concepts and predictions, people just need to describe. You can't check a box. It isn't a multiple choice question. We want to have context, and we'll get that in the survey. So we'll have an anticipated budget, and we'll have the various components of the project outlined for you, and you can comment on it. So we'll get that kind of housekeeping business out of the way at this point. But let me go back to that survey that we'll work, Susan and I will develop for you. Any specific questions you want us to ask?
I'd like them to maybe report to us or tell us some things that they've done recently that they might not have done in the past that show promise. This is about things that are new. So we want to know, what's new that you've been doing that is showing good results. And by new, you could even say pre-wetting or something like that, because that's only 15 years ago that we started pre-wetting, pre-treating, stuff like that, using liquids more effectively. I think liquids have put a big chunk of efficiency into many of our programs. We're keeping de-icing materials on the road better by making them sticky. We're putting more de-icing capacity out there in the liquid itself. It's a stronger salt than sodium chloride, usually, the liquid brine that we're using. Things like that, like what is working for you guys that you might not have done before? That's it. I think that's kind of an important question to focus on.
Absolutely.
We want people to brag about their programs, because we might not have heard it.
Yeah.
Great.
Hi, this is Jay from California. You guys hear me?
Hi, Anthony.
Yep, we can hear you, AJ.
Hey there. Sorry, I'm in the road driving in the field this week. So I feel like a little bit of following what Mark just said. We are looking for information, and but we really, at least from my understanding in this project and talking with Mark a little bit, and our own needs for all clear roads, really the main question is really what are they doing to meet needs that currently they're seeing, over the course of time, next 5 years, 10 years, big ticket items. And I imagine in the synthesis, based off of Chris, what you were saying regarding what a synthesis is, I think it's important that we probably be prepared to categorize the responses kind of almost like, so like, for example, technology can spread across multiple things, right? So, I think like for data is a big deal. Data entry is also a big deal, because data is only as good as the data. So, I think there's such a wide spectrum, and this can potentially go into scope creep, as you mentioned. But I think if we do a little bit of foundation work to set up as best we can the categories and subcategories that this information is going to come back to, then we're able to use it more effectively. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like we're going to have potential of a wide spectrum of stuff, and each one of the Clear Road members might have their own interests across categories. I don't think we want to set it up to limit one category over another. It's more cataloging and a good snap picture of all the categories and subcategories that are happening across the country. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, AJ. I appreciate that. Before I get to a couple of the other comments here, Chris, or Susan, you guys have anything, or anybody else have anything you want to follow up on what AJ said?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that's an excellent observation, AJ, and absolutely we will very early on be thinking in terms of categories, because I think it will inform how we develop the survey. And I think you're absolutely right. That's a key ingredient to identifying what we're going to be looking at, and then how we can report it out in a way that's useful. Because you're right, people are going to have different interests, and we may have 6 or 7 primary categories of information, and perhaps 3 of those are going to be of interest to you, AJ, but perhaps not to Mark. So excellent point, well taken, and we'll keep that in mind as we develop the project.
So one, and I guess we'll find out as we go through this and start to collect this information, but Clear Roads already has a division of categories for topics that it covers. Planning and methods, equipment, materials, training, technology, safety. These are all on the Clear Roads website under research, and then top research by topic. So that might provide a guide. It may not end up being the actual categories we end up using. There might be one of those may not be. I don't know, if it was training, let's say we didn't get much information on that or hardly anything, then maybe we don't include that, but we have a couple subcategories to one of the other ones. Who knows how that plays out, but that could be one, at least a jump off point for a guide to categorization. And then speaking of that, Tom Peters mentioned, would we want to include improvements of maintenance worker safety in the survey, which is one of the topics, the Clear Roads topics. So yeah, I would certainly think so. It's a very important thing. And then Jeremy had, for an open-ended question, what do you envision winter maintenance to look like in 2030? Pretty much straight to the point there.
I think it's important that we also focus on some of the negative emerging trends, and then we can maybe discuss how to, counter them. Like I said, drivers are in short supply. A lot of our vendors, we have a lot of contractors. We're 85% contractor driven, and a lot of our contractors are saying, number one is the drug testing. Weed is legal, and these guys can't smoke it and keep their CDL. Number two, when it doesn't snow, there's less money in the marketplace. Okay, so I don't have money to keep a driver on retainer, so that driver's hard to find. Number one, if I don't have something to give him to keep him interested, he's going to go seek work elsewhere. And it might not be driving, it might be whatever he has to do to keep money coming in. So that speaks to, we might start paying our vendors guaranteed money, for the first 10 pay periods of a season, so they have money in their pockets to spread around to get incentivize drivers to sit around and wait for a call instead of going to do something else that's going to make them unavailable to drive when it snows. We have a very quirky industry. You don't know 2 weeks from now that you're going to be in snow and ice in the winter with any sort of certainty, and people need a little bit of certainty, and that's something, this precious little certainty in snow and ice. And that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive.
Yeah, so Jeremy's got a point, and so do I. I agree, Mark. A great point, Mark. I was trying to think of a good question that would answer the gap analysis aspect. And then Matthew Heinze, I agree, Mark. What we do today, how it will impact agencies in the future. The other thing too, I was when you started to talk there, Mark, immediately it made me think of the year 2025 synthesis project. We selected one. And that was Andrew Lawrence out of Nevada. He proposed a synthesis project on GPS, AVL, and employee relations. Is kind of how it was framed. Really, it was the cameras that were focused on the drivers and how it could be used. Because a lot of people have been thinking, how do we use this for internal, whether it be discipline or whatever the case might be. So how do we use those? Do we use those cameras when it comes to driver behavior and things like that, when it could be part of the, evidence or whatever you want to call it? when it goes forward with, you know, discipline or other aspects. I don't know if it'd be reward or anything like that, but I'd have to share that. I could share that. We do have that research idea form, and it was selected for funding. So I can share that with Chris and Susan as well. But I know that was when you were starting to talk about that, was one of the things that my mind went to.
Yeah, this is AJ. Also, I think what immediately came to my mind when Mark, the first sentences he was saying was, you know, the concept of trying something new, a pilot program or new technology, and then finding out why you don't want to use it is just as valuable sometimes. So I think the flip side of trying new technology is why it doesn't work, or, you know, what didn't work about it, so we don't have to necessarily try something that someone else has already tried, type of thing.
Great comment.
No, it's all very helpful. Thank you, everyone. You've given us some good leads to get the survey started. Excellent. Anything else?
So Jeremy said, Chris, for the lit review, PyArc Winter Services Committee also produces a snow and ice data book every 4 years. That compiles the, that just jumped in my way. That compiles the current state of practice from around the world. The next version will be, is complete and will be released in 2026.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I mentioned that AI before and processing data. Maybe that's one of the things. Maybe we're not ready to do anything with that just yet, and somebody could have some real insights into why we're not ready to use it. And so that could be a really important bit of information for this project. Is, you know, why some of these technologies may not be quite ready to go forward yet. But it's also a 20. You know, we're looking at it. So I guess that's the other question. We call this 2030. Is this a 5-year look ahead? I mean, I don't, is it 10-year? Does it matter? Is it really important? I don't know.
That was going to be my comment, and I don't know what everyone's thoughts are, but it seemed like 2030 was a long way away when we voted on this, and now for some reason it doesn't feel like it's that far away.
2035.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm working on a concurrent report that's looking out to 2050. So I'll probably be looking at the contents of the synthesis to help that.
Well, maybe we tell people when we're framing the survey that, you know, next 5 to 10 years, you know, I don't know. What do you think?
And it sounds to me like the intent, Mark, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the intent, you know, as opposed to 2050 where which is cool, and it's really, it has a very specific purpose and function. But I think you're looking more at you're looking closer at more immediate technologies and innovations, methods, and things like that that DOTs and agencies could be implementing in the fairly near future.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
As
yeah.
opposed
This is
to, yeah.
flying drones with lasers melting snow. It's coming, but not now. So I agree. It's got to be things that are within reach.
Yeah.
Or at least within sight, not something fanciful.
Yeah, so the 2030 is relevant. It is, we are looking future thinking, but not too future thinking.
I agree.
And Jeremy said market ready as a versus WIP. I suppose that's work in progress. Okay, yeah.
Hey, Greg, I didn't get to respond, but when you mentioned the categories of topics, that was in my mind. That's probably a great place to start. But I do think that there's definitely subcategories out of all our categories in Clear Roads that I think we're going to be populating tons of things. So I don't even know, like, it might, to me, it might make sense that maybe for this group or us that we somewhat start trying to populate subcategories and categories just as a rough idea. I imagine as data comes in, we might even need to find other categories or subcategories to add. But I just feel like there's such a variety of stuff that it might be helpful to do that.
So I'm going to share something here, and then I want to ask a question. Let me see here. Share. All right, so I'm sharing our research by topic page. So these, the black headings, planning, equipment, materials, training, technology, safety, those are our topics. And then underneath those are these hyperlinks are subjects, sort of subtopics, I guess you could say, right, of each of those topics. So now I'll say, without getting into the weeds, this is something that that Brian Byrne was his baby back in 2017 when he was trying to find a way for not just ClearRoads members but non-members to navigate the ClearRoads research and better find things, and and maybe even help us identify research agendas going forward. And we've had some issues with tagging projects. If you go inside of like a particular subtopic or a subject such as de-icers under the materials topic, the projects completed and in progress here on the right are not necessarily up to date, simply because we're having a process with tagging some of those, some of the projects and bringing them into that gray area automatically. So there's some things that this could be updated a little bit, but this is perhaps, again, a way to sort of look at potential, a way to categorize these things and maybe even subcategorize. However, having said that, I'm getting a little nervous that with 6 different topics or categories, and then all these different potential, I'm not suggesting we take each one of these, but subcategories, we could be getting into scope creep here a little bit. And so, but I think it also, I guess the question I have right now, thinking of these categories, is do we go into this survey with a set of categories that we ask questions based on, or do we ask questions and see what comes back to us, and from there determine what the how they're categorizing themselves? And I don't know whether, Chris, you have some feedback, or Mark, or anybody else. Yeah, I'm stuck there.
Well, that's a good question. I can tell you how we've done it in the past, Greg, for other surveys, not necessarily for ClearRoads, but for other clients, when we've had kind of a large task, a lot of information that we're attempting to gather. What we have done is provided different segments of a survey that look very similar, ask similar questions, but have different topic areas. So we could be asking the same types of questions about activities or tasks or products that fall within the purview of planning. And what we would do is describe what we're talking about when we say planning. What are the possibilities, so people understand what these 6 categories mean? And that's one way to do it. You have the kind of a set of maybe 3 questions, 4 questions that get at each of these areas, so that we're asking people to respond with this categorization in mind. And that can be easier for us to then manage the information, because we have that somewhat high-level categorization already in place. It's more challenging if we don't put some kind of guardrails around what we're asking, because then we have to tease out, okay, what are they talking about, and where would it go? I mean, it would I think it would help us to, and I realize that the categorization, in theory would be arbitrary, but I really like this idea of maintaining the through line of the 6 categories that are in place for clear roads. I think it makes sense to continue to use them. Now, yes, there will be, subtopics, but I guess I don't want to worry about that now. Let's see what the information tells us, and maybe somebody puts something somewhere where we end up shifting it. But from my perspective, having done many of these surveys, if we can provide an infrastructure for people to respond, it's going to be easier for Susan when she is analyzing the responses. So unless you have an objection to that, I really like your idea, first of all, of categories. Second, of continuing to use the Clear Roads ones that already are structuring the information that's already out there, that Clear Roads has generated. And then let us determine, based on what we get, what those subtopics will be. That's part of what our analysis will be. What are the common themes? What do we see again and again? And we'll identify through that those subtopics that may have absolutely nothing to do with what you see on the screen in front of you, but it's still going to be under equipment, somehow. So what do you think about that approach?
Sounds very reasonable.
Okay. What we've done, I don't know if we've necessarily done it. I think we have. Greg, you can remind me if we haven't. But if we haven't, I'd like to start now with this. What we often do for other clients is we prepare an update of survey responses so that you can see the type of feedback that we're getting, and we'll organize it in this manner so that you'll see what's coming in under these various topic areas. And that way you'll have a sense for, not necessarily everything that's going to be in the report, but the volume of feedback that we're getting on the survey will not be a surprise to you because you will have seen an update, and we'll do a couple of them. We'll do one after the survey's been in the field for 2 weeks, and then we'll do a final one. So the raw data essentially, or at least enough about raw data so that you have a good sense of what's coming in the report.
Yeah, Chris, thank you for that. You have done that with Clear Roads before, and I think it's proved to be really helpful. And so that's a good reminder too. I mentioned this to the other the subcommittee that met last Friday, that again, unlike a regular research project, there aren't like 5, 6, 7 different kinds of deliverables along the road of the project. So we don't come together and meet, that many times or close to that many times throughout a synthesis project. After the scoping meeting, again, as Chris has outlined, you'll receive a project scope, what it is that they're going to, what kind of information they're going to seek out and how they're going to seek it out. But that will also include the draft survey questions. And so that in a regular Clear Roads research project, that would be kind of after this, there's a kickoff meeting, right? So this is kind of a scoping / kickoff meeting, so to speak. And then after the kickoff meeting and research project, they'll do the lit review, and then they'll draft up the survey questions before they do the survey. And that's when you'll come back and have a chance to comment on those survey questions. So those are all kind of combined, so to speak, in a synthesis project. So when you get this scope of work, you'll see the draft survey questions. But then after that, really, you'll see, as Chris just outlined again, you'll see some of the interim responses that they're getting to the survey. But then after that, it's really just the final draft final synthesis report that you'll see and then review prior to us, any comments that you may have and us finalizing it and posting it. So it's also unlike a research project in the amount of times that we have to meet. And also, it's less burden for you. Like a regular research project there's a lot to review. So I guess that's, anyway, it's a bit of a heads up, but also kind of a good thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think we've we have talked a lot about what it is that the group is looking for. We've talked about the survey. We've talked about topics and how the survey will likely be structured. One of the things I was wondering is, we were talking about some potential questions. Would it make sense to ask folks if there's somebody or some group that we should talk to when it comes to that may have unique insight into the future, the near future of winter maintenance? Like, I'm sure you'll hear, if we ask that question, I'm sure Wilf would be one of the answers that we would get, right? So that's, I don't know if that's worthwhile to ask the folks who they would turn to if they were looking for information on that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can certainly, I'm sorry, Ray, I was letting the subcommittee weigh in, but we can certainly ask what we can do, on the front end is identify, there's interest in having researchers, Wilf Nixon being obviously the one we're talking about, researchers respond to the survey. We can include in the scope that we'll be preparing a few names in addition to Wilf's. But I think we can certainly add a question to the survey to see if there are others, and we'll be monitoring the responses as they come in so that we can do that outreach, as we see it. If someone has a recommendation, we'll shoot out the survey and see if we can get some additional feedback.
So we will obviously be surveying Clear Roads members. Sounds like we'll be identifying the PIARC and one of its subcommittees that, I have to go scroll back. Surwick. Yes, Surwick. Okay. I was going to switch the R and the W. So, and I would, it may not. I would also make sure that we, just with the Clear Road survey part of, I don't even know how we'll break this up, how the mechanics of this will work, but definitely within the Clear Roads members / partners, we would include the Norwegian Public Roads Administration contacts, which is, we have a couple folks over there that I can give you their information. Where was I going with this? So typically when we do surveys, obviously there's Clear Roads members, Clear Roads partners. There is, sometimes we do the snow and ice listserv. I don't know if that makes sense to do here. Maybe not. But what we don't normally do is use we have that constant contact list. And the reason why I bring that up in this particular instance is because that constant contact list does include all of our researchers and anybody that has interest in the Clear Roads program. So there might be, because I'm trying to think, so if we do Clear Roads members, partners, unless we do snow and ice listserv and then all those researchers were a part of that, we may not capture them. I think it would be a more direct way to make sure we capture our researchers or folks that work in winter maintenance research would be to use the Clear Roads constant contact list. And this is a bit of a stretch. And again, I don't want to get into scope creep here, but I'm just kind of spitballing some ideas. The other one I would think about is, and we do this for whenever RFPs are posted, is I reach out to the CUTC, Council University Transportation Centers listserv, any transportation researchers around the country. Granted, most of them aren't in winter maintenance, and most of the ones that are in winter maintenance we know about already, but you never know. There's a reason why I use that list for RFP purposes, is because sometimes you do capture new folks that are working on some interesting ideas that are on the periphery of winter maintenance that identify a future path perhaps, but they haven't been a part of our program to that point. So something to consider, I guess.
Yeah, those are really interesting thoughts, Greg. Maybe, you know, I'm just thinking about, as you said, the potential for scope creep in the volume of responses, depending on how big our pool of potential respondents is. And maybe what would be helpful to me is to see the constant contact list, to see how many people we're talking about. Because I guess what I'm envisioning is a pretty much open-ended, a survey that's really heavily loaded with open-ended questions, because we want the context. We want, you know, the multiple choice questions are probably not going to be incredibly useful to you. We want to hear the context. So that means open-ended questions. And then if you're talking about, you know, a really large distribution list, and you get really, really lucky and you get a high response rate, then you have a bit of a significant dealing with all of that data. So maybe what I love the idea of having more than just a couple of researchers, but maybe if you and I could talk offline about that constant contact list, and then talk about what might be a manageable number of respondents, if that sounds like a reasonable way to approach it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Greg, the only thing that kind of came to my mind, I don't know if this is a valid thought or not, but based off what you're saying, I mean, you know, for example, today I received, maybe other ClearRoads people have received emails related to the virtual ARWIS, and that guy sent that thing out today on how basically it's becoming better and better. I just worry that if we get into other, you know, we pass the point where we're going to people that are managing, making, you know, giving us information versus researchers or even places where they're creating products, and of course they're going to be trying to sell us their products. So I don't know if there's a line between who we're accepting information from. You know, I mean, of course we want to know as much as we can, but I just wonder if there's a line between people managing versus people trying to sell us stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I don't know the answer to that question necessarily right off the bat. I mean, there's the vendors. I know they can. There's two sides of the coin. They can be a really good resource when it comes to thinking of new ways to approach a problem. So they could provide some very valuable information for this synthesis. But on the other hand, you don't want them just out there marketing their wares, because Lord knows you get plenty of that through non-ClearRoad stuff, just people calling on you all the time. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I have an answer on how to manage that.
I like Jeremy's idea.
I say for
I'm sorry.
I'm not able to look at chat, but for me, I would be more interested in people that are actually managing roads and are responsible for winter operations. You know, it doesn't matter if it's for a DOT, for a state or a county or a city or another country. All that's valid to me. But I just wonder if we're asking the people that are making the products, that might be where that line kind of gets blurry.
And so Jeremy had said perhaps academic and industry responses can be placed into separate buckets. If we were to do that, I think we would have to be, you know, again, so Chris and I are going to touch base offline on our constant contact list, which is approaching 1,000 members now. So maybe what we would do is, you know, if we are going to look at academics, I mean, I think one way to manage the potential for scope creep is to, you know, maybe target some of our the folks that the academics that have done research for us in the past, because they are so familiar with ClearRoads and they are more those are the ones that are more entrenched in the winter maintenance research as opposed to sort of operating on the periphery. I mean, a name that comes to me right offhand is Laura Fay, and she's had some great ideas for follow-up research,
Yeah.
and she absolutely does not have an agenda, just to make her university money. She's quite literally trying to make the winter maintenance industry better and more useful to you all. So folks like her make a lot of sense to me. Like, I think she should absolutely be receiving this survey. And other folks like her. We've got a number of folks that have done research for us in the past, but not an inordinately large number of researchers. So I think that academic list could be very manageable. If you guys had vendors that you would like to hear from, maybe a handful of vendors or so, then perhaps that's something you could send our way, send to me, and then I can forward on to Chris and Susan and see how that works out. I don't know, Chris, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, first of all, agree with everything you said. That's kind of where I was headed. Interestingly, I was thinking of Laura Fay. I think we can have a manageable list of folks that have worked with you, worked with Clear Roads, totally doable. Well, when 1,000 people in constant contact, that frightened me. So we'll want to be more targeted, but completely agree with that. As far as vendors, we have worked on other projects before that had a vendor aspect because there was a product aspect. And in some cases, we have asked vendors to respond to surveys. We surprisingly have not had good luck with that, which is odd because you would think that would be a marketing opportunity and they'd be quite willing to do that. But what we have done consistently with projects is to have a vendor or product section in the literature search portion of the report that just documents what these products are. It's not passing judgment. It's just information based. This is the website. This is what this tool does, that sort of thing. So that I would expect we would be doing just as a matter of course. As we encounter things that are mentioned either in the literature or just come up as we do our searching.
Yeah,
that sounds good. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, Mark, others, what do you think about what Chris has suggested?
Sounds good. I know that time's getting tight. I just wanted to mention one last thing. We were asking people to attest to efficiencies or practices that have increased their efficiencies recently over time. And it kind of works hand in hand with something that a lot of us have been pulled into the last couple of years, performance metrics. And I just wanted to say that because you're telling us something is efficient, we kind of want to know how you analyzed, the performance metric that you looked at that with. Like, how do you know it's efficient? So I just wanted to say that and just get us thinking about that.
Will do.
Also, Andrew said, I tend to agree. I think some vendor insight on products they're working on or looking into could be valuable. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, we are at the end of our hour now. Chris, is there anything else, or Susan, anything else that you guys need from this group before you begin drafting up?
I don't think so, Susan. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions before we let everybody go.
Hi, everyone. I really don't have any questions at this point. You've given us a lot of interesting things to work with. So I look forward to Chris and I sitting down and coming up with a scope for you.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thanks, Susan. And thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the discussion today. I'll talk to Greg and we'll be back in touch with a scope. We'll get this project started.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, great. Oh, and so Jeremy said, along with Mark's comment for the lit review, add NCHRP 889 snow and ice performance measures. Okay. And I'll share this recording. Would it be helpful? Do you guys want me to share this recording on the members page? Like I sometimes do. I don't know if that would be, I did it for the other synthesis projects. With Chris, would that, and Susan, would it be helpful to you guys too to share that as well as transcript with you?
Sure, that'd be
tend
great.
Yeah, and I tend to rely on the transcript. So
Okay.
yeah, that would,
Okay. All right. Took a little while for the last one to post, so, and for me to find it, but anyway, yeah, I'll get that up on the members page here pretty soon, the recording, and I'll definitely share the transcript with you as soon as possible. Chris, you and I can touch base through email, phone call here shortly.
that sounds
Okay.
great.
Terrific. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today, and have a great week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.